The fate of the free world hung precariously in the balance. Across the English Channel, the largest amphibious invasion in history was meticulously planned, an undertaking of unprecedented scale and unimaginable risk. Millions of lives, the very future of democracy, depended on its success. But within this monumental endeavor lay a seemingly insurmountable challenge, a logistical nightmare that threatened to derail everything. How do you bridge the impossible gap between ship and sand, delivering waves of men and mountains of equipment onto heavily fortified hostile beaches? This was the question that plagued Allied strategists, a problem so profound it could spell doom for Operation Overlord. Conventional vessels were simply not equipped for such a task. Existing landing craft were slow, vulnerable, and often incapable of depositing troops directly onto the shore without exposing them to devastating enemy fire. The solution, if one could be found, needed to be revolutionary, robust, and capable of mass production. It needed to be a vessel born of necessity, forged in the crucible of war, yet its creator, a man whose ingenuity would save countless lives and fundamentally alter the course of World War II, would remain largely unknown. His name doesn't appear in the same breath as Eisenhower, Churchill, or Roosevelt, even though his invention was as critical to D-Day's success as any strategic plan or act of heroism. Yet, despite this monumental impact, despite his boats carrying the vast majority of Allied forces onto the beaches of Normandy, despite being produced in staggering numbers by his Louisiana factories, Andrew Jackson Higgins remains largely overlooked by history. Why was this unlikely genius and his world-changing contribution relegated to the shadows? How could a man whose vision saved countless lives be so profoundly forgotten? This is the story of Andrew Jackson Higgins, a man whose life was as unconventional as his most famous invention. Born in Columbus, Nebraska in 1886, Higgins was never one to follow the beaten path. His early life was marked by a restless spirit and an innate knack for engineering, combined with a fierce independence that often put him at odds with authority. He was expelled from Creighton University for fighting, a testament to his fiery temperament, and pursued a career in various fields before finding his true calling in the bayous of Louisiana. Higgins arrived in New Orleans in 1910, drawn by the burgeoning timber industry. He started a small business, Higgins Lumber and Export Company, building boats designed to navigate the shallow, treacherous waters of the Gulf Coast and the Mississippi River Delta. These weren't warships, they were workhorses, shallow draft vessels for dredging, oil exploration, and transporting timber. But even in these early designs, the seeds of his future genius were being sown. He experimented relentlessly, pushing the boundaries of hull design, materials, and propulsion, always seeking to create a craft that was faster, more durable, and more efficient in challenging environments. His reputation grew steadily within the marine industry for producing innovative, high-quality wooden boats. He became known for his Eureka boat, a vessel with a tunnel stern and a unique spoonbill bow, designed to operate in extremely shallow water without damaging its propeller. This design allowed it to slide over submerged logs and sandbars, a seemingly niche feature that would later prove pivotal. Higgins was a hands-on inventor, often found in his boatyards, sleeves rolled up, personally overseeing every detail, barking orders, and inspiring fierce loyalty from his workforce. He was a man of contradictions, gruff, demanding, yet deeply patriotic and fiercely protective of his employees. As the shadow of war began to lengthen across Europe in the late 1930s, the United States military, particularly the Marine Corps, recognized a critical deficiency. Their existing landing craft were rudimentary at best, repurposed fishing boats or hastily modified barges. The need for a dedicated, effective vessel to transport troops and equipment directly onto enemy shores was becoming glaringly apparent. They needed a boat that could withstand rough seas, carry significant payloads, and crucially, land troops directly onto a beach, allowing them to disembark quickly and relatively safely, ideally without having to wade through chest-deep water under enemy fire. The military began searching for solutions, often finding only inadequate prototypes or theoretical designs. They scoured the nation for a boat builder with the vision and capability to solve this monumental problem. They needed a boat that could get troops from ship to shore, rapidly and effectively, directly onto the beach. The existing designs, cumbersome and slow, were simply not up to the task of a modern, large-scale amphibious assault. The military knew what they needed, but they didn't know who could build it or how. The answer, unbeknownst to many, lay with an eccentric, self-taught boat builder in Louisiana, a man obsessed with designing boats that could conquer any waterway, no matter how challenging. This was the stage upon which Andrew Jackson Higgins would step, his unlikely genius about to change the world. The military search for a revolutionary landing craft eventually led them to the unlikely shores of New Orleans. They had seen countless prototypes, none of which truly met the rigorous demands of an amphibious assault. Then, word reached them about a maverick boat builder, Andrew Jackson Higgins, whose company, Higgins Industries, was renowned for its shallow draft vessels, particularly the Eureka boat. This wasn't a warship, but a rugged workboat designed for the treacherous bayous, capable of navigating waters so shallow they would beach almost any other craft. In 1941, the U.S. Marine Corps, desperate for a solution, finally approached Higgins. They presented their requirements: a boat that could transport troops and light vehicles from ship to shore, land directly on a beach, and quickly disembark its cargo, all while withstanding enemy fire and rough seas. Higgins listened, his mind already racing. He knew his Eureka boat, with its unique tunnel stern and spoonbill bow, was almost perfectly suited. Its design allowed the propeller to operate in a tunnel, protecting it from damage in shallow water and from submerged obstacles. The spoonbill bow, designed to slide over logs and sandbars, offered an unexpected advantage for beaching. Higgins immediately understood the core problem: getting men and equipment off the boat and onto the beach, swiftly and safely. The existing designs required troops to clamber over the sides, often into deep water, making them vulnerable targets. Higgins, with his characteristic disregard for convention and an almost obsessive focus on practicality, realized the solution wasn't just about getting to the beach, but getting off it. His breakthrough was deceptively simple, yet utterly transformative: a lowering ramp at the bow. He took his existing 36-foot Eureka boat and began to modify it. He reinforced the hull, added armor plating for troop protection, and most critically, designed a hinged ramp that could be lowered directly onto the beach. This ramp allowed troops to exit directly forward, running onto dry land or shallow water, minimizing their exposure and maximizing the speed of disembarkation. It was a game-changer, turning a laborious, dangerous process into a rapid, efficient one. This modified vessel became known as the Landing Craft, Vehicle, Personnel, or LCVP. But to the men who would ride it into battle, it was simply the Higgins Boat. Higgins didn't just design the boat, he built it with a speed and efficiency that astounded the military establishment. His factories in New Orleans, initially focused on timber boats, were quickly retooled for mass production. He was a demanding, often volatile boss, but his patriotism was undeniable, and his workforce, a diverse mix of men and women, black and white, urban and rural, responded with fierce loyalty. Higgins Industries became a beacon of wartime production, churning out these vital vessels at an unprecedented rate. His assembly lines were models of innovation, long before Henry Ford's methods were widely adopted. He pushed his workers and himself to the limit, understanding the dire urgency of their mission. Initial military trials of the LCVP were nothing short of revelatory. The boat performed flawlessly, demonstrating its ability to carry a platoon of 36 men or a jeep and 12 men or 8,000 pounds of cargo directly onto the shore. Its shallow draft meant it could get closer to the beach than any other craft, and the front ramp allowed for rapid deployment. The Marines, who had been struggling with inadequate landing craft for years, instantly recognized its genius. General Dwight D. Eisenhower himself would later declare Higgins to be the man who won the war for us. It was a bold statement, but one that spoke volumes about the boat's strategic importance. The Higgins boat wasn't just a piece of engineering, it was a psychological weapon. It gave Allied planners the confidence that they could indeed bridge the impossible gap between ship and sand. It transformed the concept of amphibious warfare, making large-scale landings, previously considered suicidal, a viable strategy. Without the Higgins boat, the logistics of D-Day, the very idea of landing hundreds of thousands of troops and their equipment onto the heavily fortified beaches of Normandy would have been an insurmountable nightmare. The humble wooden vessel, born from a Louisiana boat builder's obsession with shallow waters, was now poised to carry the fate of the free world on its sturdy planks. The demand for the Higgins boat, the LCVP, exploded. Not just the U.S. Marine Corps, but the Army, Navy, and even Allied nations under Lend-Lease agreements clamored for this revolutionary craft. Higgins Industries, once a modest builder of workboats, transformed into a sprawling industrial empire, a testament to American wartime production and the relentless drive of its founder. Higgins's factories in New Orleans became a whirlwind of activity, operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. From its initial workforce of a few hundred, Higgins Industries swelled to employ over 30,000 people at its peak, becoming the largest industrial employer in the Deep South. Andrew Higgins, with his characteristic blend of gruff management and visionary leadership, fostered a diverse workforce that was revolutionary for its time. He hired men and women, black and white, urban and rural, often paying them wages far superior to local norms, and promoting based on merit rather than race or gender. His philosophy was simple: if you could do the job, you had a place in his factories. This inclusive approach, born of necessity and Higgins's own unconventional ideals, created an incredibly loyal and productive workforce, united by the singular mission of building the boats that would win the war. They understood the stakes, and they worked with an almost religious fervor. The sheer numbers are staggering. By the end of the war, Higgins Industries had produced over 20,000 LCVPs, along with thousands of other vital vessels, including larger landing craft, mechanized LCMs, patrol torpedo PT boats, and tank landing craft LCTs. His innovative assembly line techniques, often predating those of other major manufacturers, allowed for this unprecedented output. Higgins didn't just build boats. He built an entire logistical ecosystem, designing and perfecting every aspect of their manufacture. He was an uncompromising perfectionist, personally inspecting hulls, testing engines, and pushing his engineers to constantly innovate, always seeking to improve the reliability and resilience of his craft. This monumental production effort allowed Allied planners to finally envision and execute large-scale amphibious assaults. Prior to the Higgins boat, such operations were fraught with prohibitive risks and logistical nightmares. Now, with a reliable, mass-produced vessel capable of delivering troops and equipment directly onto enemy shores, the impossible became merely incredibly difficult. The Higgins boat was not just a piece of equipment, it was the linchpin of Allied strategy, the foundational element upon which campaigns in North Africa, Sicily, Italy, the Pacific Islands, and ultimately Normandy would be built. As the meticulous planning for Operation Overlord, the D-Day invasion, intensified, the critical role of the Higgins boat became paramount. Tens of thousands of these LCVPs were amassed in British ports, their distinctive bow ramps a symbol of the impending assault. Every detail of the invasion, from the timing of the tides to the deployment of individual platoons, hinged on the reliable performance of these humble wooden vessels. Thousands of young soldiers and sailors, many barely out of their teens, trained relentlessly on the Higgins boats, learning to navigate treacherous waters, coordinate disembarkations under simulated fire, and trust their lives to the sturdy construction of these craft. The boats were tested in every conceivable condition, in rough seas and calm, under the weight of men and machines. Their ruggedness and versatility became legendary among the troops. Commanders understood that the success or failure of the most ambitious military operation in history rested squarely on the ability of these boats to bridge the impossible gap between the English Channel and the beaches of Normandy. As the final days and hours before D-Day ticked away, the Higgins boat stood ready, packed with the hopes and fears of an entire generation, poised to carry the fate of the free world onto the blood-soaked sands of France. June 6, 1944. The longest day. Before dawn broke over the English Channel, an armada of nearly 7,000 vessels, the greatest ever assembled, surged towards the coast of Normandy. At the vanguard of this monumental effort, slicing through the choppy grey waters, were thousands of Higgins boats. Packed tightly within their steel-reinforced hulls were the hopes, fears, and grim determination of hundreds of thousands of Allied soldiers, poised to unleash the fury of liberation upon Hitler's Atlantic Wall. This was the moment Andrew Jackson Higgins's unlikely genius would be tested on the grandest, most brutal stage imaginable. The journey across the Channel was perilous. Seasickness ravaged the troops crammed into the LCVPs, but the boats themselves proved their mettle, navigating rough conditions that would have swamped lesser craft. As they neared the French coast, the air filled with the deafening roar of naval gunfire and aerial bombardment. The Higgins boats, small and vulnerable, were about to become the essential bridge between the relative safety of the transport ships and the hellish beaches. Artillery shells exploded around them, machine gun fire stitched patterns in the water, and mines lay hidden beneath the waves. Yet they pressed on, each boat a tiny vital cog in the colossal machinery of Operation Overlord. When the distinctive bow ramps of the LCVPs finally splashed down onto the sand or into the murderous surf, they unleashed a torrent of men and equipment. On Omaha Beach, where German defenses were strongest and resistance fiercest, the Higgins boats faced an almost unimaginable crucible. Many were hit, their wooden hulls shattered, their crews and passengers decimated. But for every boat lost, another pressed forward, delivering its precious cargo. The rapid disembarkation, allowed by Higgins's ingenious ramp design, was not just a convenience. It was a matter of life and death, minimizing exposure to enemy fire and allowing troops to establish footholds, however precarious, on the heavily defended shores. Throughout D-Day, from the relatively lighter resistance of Utah Beach to the horrors of Omaha, the Higgins boats performed their indispensable duty. They ferried the initial assault waves, then returned again and again, bringing in reinforcements, supplies, ammunition, and even medical personnel. They were the workhorses of the invasion, tirelessly bridging the gap between sea and land, ensuring a continuous flow of men and material onto the contested beaches. Without their robust design and mass availability, the sheer scale of the D-Day landings would have been impossible. Allied commanders watched in awe and relief as the seemingly endless stream of Higgins boats delivered their payload, turning the tide of battle inch by bloody inch. The success of D-Day, and indeed the entire war effort, hinged on this logistical miracle. The Higgins boat had proven itself not just a valuable asset, but an absolutely critical one. Its simple yet revolutionary design, born from a Louisiana boat builder's pragmatic obsession with shallow waters, had fundamentally altered the course of history. It had saved countless lives by reducing the time troops spent exposed to enemy fire, and it had enabled the largest amphibious invasion ever conceived to succeed. The world was now witnessing the profound impact of Andrew Jackson Higgins's vision, though few outside the military high command and the men who rode them into battle truly understood the name behind the craft. The boats continued their relentless work for days and weeks after the initial landings, cementing their legacy as the unsung heroes of the invasion. The relentless demand for the Higgins boat did not cease with the initial D-Day landings. Far from it. As Allied forces pushed deeper into France and then across Europe, the LCVP continued to serve as the backbone of logistical support, proving its versatility far beyond the beaches of Normandy. It was indispensable for river crossings, ferrying troops and supplies across the Seine, the Rhine, and countless other waterways, adapting seamlessly to new challenges. In the Pacific theater, where island-hopping campaigns were the brutal reality, the Higgins boat was equally crucial. Its shallow draft and robust construction made it perfect for navigating coral reefs and landing on unforgiving volcanic shores, becoming synonymous with the relentless advance against Imperial Japan. From the jungles of Guadalcanal to the black sands of Iwo Jima, the LCVP carried the fight, delivering marines and equipment under the most hellish conditions imaginable. Its adaptability and sheer numbers ensured that the lifeline between supply ships and the front lines remained unbroken, a testament to Higgins's foresight in designing a truly multi-purpose craft. Military leaders, those directly responsible for the strategic and tactical successes of the war, understood this profound impact. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Supreme Allied Commander, famously stated that Andrew Jackson Higgins was the man who won the war for us. It was a statement of immense gratitude and strategic insight, recognizing that without the Higgins boat, the entire concept of large-scale amphibious warfare, and thus the very path to victory, would have been fundamentally altered, if not entirely impossible. Admirals and generals across all branches of the armed forces echoed this sentiment, showering Higgins Industries with commendations and awards. They knew the name Andrew Jackson Higgins, and they knew the indispensable value of his invention. Yet, despite this high-level recognition, the public at large remained largely unaware. The heroes celebrated were the fighting men, the strategic masterminds, the political leaders. The man who built the craft that carried them to victory remained in the shadows. Why this profound disconnect? Part of it lay in the nature of wartime information and propaganda, which often focused on charismatic leaders and battlefield exploits rather than the logistical intricacies of industrial production. But a significant factor was Higgins himself. Andrew Jackson Higgins was no polished public relations figure. He was a gruff, outspoken, and often controversial individual, a self-made man who chafed against bureaucracy and minced no words. He was known for his fiery temper, his unyielding demands for quality, and his fierce independence. He fought constantly with government officials over contracts, materials, and design specifications, always convinced his way was the best way, and often he was right. His battles with the Navy in particular were legendary as he pushed back against their attempts to modify his designs or slow down his production. This uncompromising personality, while instrumental in driving his factories to unprecedented output, did not lend itself to public adoration or careful image cultivation. He was a builder, an inventor, a patriot, not a politician or a celebrity. He was a man driven by an almost obsessive need to solve problems, to build the best boat possible, and to contribute everything he had to the war effort. His personal life was inextricably linked to his work. He lived and breathed Higgins Industries, pouring his boundless energy into every aspect of its operation. He often slept in his office, working around the clock, pushing himself and his workforce to their absolute limits. His vision, however, extended beyond just building boats. He was a pioneer in industrial relations, establishing progressive policies for his diverse workforce, including equal pay for equal work regardless of race or gender, and providing housing and medical care at a time when such benefits were rare. He saw his employees as a vital part of the war effort, treating them with a paternalistic yet demanding respect that earned him fierce loyalty. These were not the actions of a man seeking personal glory, but of one deeply committed to his mission. The end of the war brought a swift and dramatic shift. The gargantuan machinery of wartime production ground to a halt. Demand for landing craft plummeted overnight. Higgins Industries, which had been the largest employer in the Deep South, faced the immense challenge of converting back to peacetime production. Andrew Higgins, ever the innovator, attempted to pivot his factories to build everything from housing to consumer goods, but the transition proved difficult. The post-war economic landscape was complex, and the specific niche that Higgins had so brilliantly filled during the war evaporated. The world, eager to forget the horrors of conflict, quickly moved on. The focus shifted to rebuilding, to new technologies, and to celebrating the enduring symbols of victory. The unassuming wooden boats that had carried the invasion, and the unlikely genius behind them, began their slow fade into historical obscurity, overshadowed by the very peace they had helped secure. The nation, in its eagerness to embrace a new era, inadvertently consigned one of its most critical wartime innovators to the footnotes of history. The end of World War II brought not just peace, but a stark, unforgiving reality for Andrew Jackson Higgins and his industrial empire. The boundless demand for landing craft, which had fueled Higgins Industries' meteoric rise, vanished almost overnight. The colossal factories in New Orleans, once a whirlwind of round-the-clock production, now stood largely silent, their vast workforce, once numbering over 30,000, facing massive layoffs. The very peace Higgins had helped secure, the victory his boats had made possible, now threatened to undo everything he had built. Higgins, ever the relentless innovator, attempted to steer his company through this treacherous post-war landscape. He envisioned a future where his factories, so adept at mass production, could turn their expertise to peacetime needs. He explored building everything from affordable housing to consumer goods, from buses to refrigerators, even attempting to create a revolutionary new type of boat for civilian use. But the transition was fraught with insurmountable challenges. The specialized machinery, the unique skill sets of his workforce, and the sheer scale of his operations were ill-suited for the rapidly shifting civilian market. The government, which had been his sole client, now had little use for his products, and the economic climate was far more competitive and complex than the singular focus of wartime production. His health, already strained by the relentless pressures and exhaustive hours of the war years, began to fail him. The fire and fury that had made him an indispensable wartime leader, the uncompromising spirit that had driven his factories to unprecedented output, now found little outlet or appreciation in the calmer, yet more cutthroat world of peacetime commerce. His gruff, outspoken nature, which had often put him at odds with bureaucracy even during the war, now made it even harder to navigate the new business environment. He remained a patriot, a visionary, but the world had moved on, and it seemed to have forgotten the man who had been so critical to its salvation. This rapid descent into obscurity was not accidental, nor was it entirely unexpected for a figure like Higgins. Public memory, especially in the aftermath of a global conflict, tends to lionize the most visible heroes, the generals who commanded armies, the politicians who forged alliances, the soldiers who fought on the front lines. The industrialist, even one whose innovations were deemed the man who won the war, often remained in the background, his contributions seen as logistical rather than heroic in the traditional sense. The story of a wooden boat, however revolutionary, simply lacked the dramatic appeal of a daring air raid or a heroic charge. Furthermore, Higgins himself was not a man who sought the limelight. He was driven by a deep-seated patriotism and an almost obsessive need to build, to solve problems, and to push the boundaries of what was possible. He was a man of action, not of public relations. His battles with government officials, his unyielding demands for quality, and his general disregard for conventional etiquette meant he rarely cultivated the kind of public image that would secure him a place in popular history. He was too busy making history to worry about being remembered by it. The very success of the Higgins boat also contributed to its fading memory. It became so ubiquitous, so fundamental to Allied operations, that it was simply taken for granted. Like the air a soldier breathed or the boots on his feet, the LCVP was an essential tool, but rarely the subject of individual celebration. It was part of the background, an enabler of victory rather than the focal point of heroism. As new technologies emerged and the focus shifted to the future, the humble wooden landing craft, having served its purpose magnificently, was quickly relegated to the annals of military hardware, rarely highlighted in history textbooks or popular accounts of the war. Despite General Eisenhower's profound declaration, "The man who won the war for us," Andrew Jackson Higgins's name did not resonate with the public in the same way as the great military and political leaders of his era. His story, his genius, and the monumental impact of his invention were effectively erased from the collective consciousness. The unlikely genius faded into the shadows, his world-changing contribution becoming a forgotten footnote in the grand narrative of World War II. The irony was palpable. A man whose vision saved countless lives and fundamentally altered the course of history was profoundly overlooked, his legacy buried under the weight of the very peace he helped forge. For decades, the question remained, how could such an indispensable figure be so completely forgotten? Yet the truth of his impact, though obscured, could not be entirely extinguished. The seeds of rediscovery, however small, were eventually sown, waiting for a time when history might finally remember the man behind the boat that saved D-Day. Yet the truth of his impact, though obscured, could not be entirely extinguished. The seeds of rediscovery, however small, were eventually sown, waiting for a time when history might finally remember the man behind the boat that saved D-Day. For decades, while the general public remained largely oblivious, the profound significance of Andrew Jackson Higgins and his revolutionary landing craft continued to resonate within specific circles. The veterans who had stormed the beaches, those who had crammed into the LCVPs under fire, never forgot the vessels that delivered them to destiny. Their memories, often shared quietly among themselves or within their families, formed an unspoken testament to the boat's importance. For these men, the Higgins boat was not merely a piece of equipment. It was the fragile wooden bridge between life and death, the essential enabler of their mission. Their collective, albeit initially unamplified voice, was a constant undercurrent that refused to let the boat's legacy completely vanish. Beyond the personal accounts of the fighting men, military strategists and historians engaged in the painstaking analysis of World War II consistently returned to the Higgins boat. In every serious study of amphibious warfare, in every dissection of D-Day's logistics, the LCVP was an undeniable, indispensable factor. While Higgins's name might not always have been explicitly highlighted in popular narratives, his invention was foundational to understanding the tactical and strategic successes of the Allied forces. They understood that the very concept of large-scale amphibious landings, which defined so much of the war in both Europe and the Pacific, would have been utterly impossible without a craft possessing the LCVP's unique capabilities. The bow ramp, the shallow draft, the robust construction, these were not mere design features, they were the pillars upon which victory was built. As the years turned into decades, and the world began to reflect more deeply on the true scope and mechanisms of World War II, a renewed interest in the how of victory, not just the who, began to emerge. This shift in historical perspective allowed the crucial logistical and industrial contributions to gain the recognition they deserved. It was in this evolving historical landscape that the story of Andrew Jackson Higgins slowly, painstakingly began to resurface. Dedicated historians, researchers, and even a few tenacious journalists started to piece together the fragments of his forgotten narrative, unearthing archived documents, old factory records, and the fading testimonies of those who had known him or worked for him. A pivotal moment in this slow awakening came with the establishment of institutions dedicated to preserving the memory of World War II. Perhaps nowhere was this more evident than in Higgins's own city, New Orleans, with the eventual founding of the National D-Day Museum, now known as the National Dobby-Toit Museum. This museum, with its profound commitment to telling the comprehensive story of the American experience in the war, naturally became a champion for the unlikely genius of Andrew Jackson Higgins. It provided a permanent, prominent platform to showcase the Higgins Boat, to explain its revolutionary design, and to illuminate the extraordinary life of its inventor. Through meticulous exhibits, educational programs, and the collection of historical artifacts, the museum began the vital work of restoring Higgins to his rightful place in history. The irony of Higgins's uncompromising personality, which had once contributed to his obscurity, now became part of his unique appeal. His gruff independence, his fiery battles with bureaucracy, and his relentless pursuit of perfection, once seen as difficult, were now reinterpreted as the hallmarks of a true visionary. He was not a polished public figure, but a raw, authentic force of nature whose singular focus on building the best possible boat for his country transcended personal ambition. This re-evaluation allowed his story to resonate with a new generation, captivated by the idea of an individual whose sheer will and ingenuity could alter the course of global conflict, even if he didn't fit the traditional mold of a war hero. The increasing frequency of D-Day anniversaries also played a significant role. Each milestone commemoration brought a fresh wave of public interest, not just in the heroism of the soldiers, but in the intricate planning and technological marvels that made the invasion possible. Television documentaries, books, and articles began to explore these deeper layers of the D-Day story, and it became increasingly difficult to discuss the landings without giving due credit to the ubiquitous landing craft. The sight of surviving Higgins boats at commemorative events, often meticulously restored, served as a powerful, tangible reminder of their indispensable role. The silent wooden hulls finally began to speak volumes, carrying not just soldiers, but the forgotten narrative of their creator. This rediscovery was not an overnight sensation, but a gradual, organic process driven by a persistent dedication to historical truth. It was a testament to the fact that some legacies, however deeply buried, are simply too critical, too profoundly impactful, to remain forever in the shadows. Andrew Jackson Higgins, the man who built the boats that saved D-Day, was finally starting his slow, deserved ascent from the footnotes of history into the spotlight of remembrance. His story, once relegated to obscurity, was proving to be a powerful embodiment of American ingenuity, perseverance, and the often unseen forces that shape the destiny of nations. The slow, painstaking journey of Andrew Jackson Higgins's rediscovery has, in recent years, gained significant momentum, propelled by a deeper understanding of World War II's complexities and a renewed appreciation for its unsung heroes. This resurgence of interest isn't merely academic. It has permeated popular consciousness through various mediums, ensuring that the legacy of the unlikely genius is finally etched into the broader historical narrative. Modern documentaries, meticulously researched books, and compelling articles have moved beyond the traditional battlefield accounts to explore the pivotal role of industrial innovation, bringing Higgins and his boats into sharper focus. These narratives highlight not just the mechanical genius of the LCVP, but the extraordinary, often turbulent personality of its creator, presenting a fuller, more nuanced portrait of the man. Historical societies and preservation groups, inspired by the work of the National W22 Museum, have also played a crucial role. They have actively sought out surviving Higgins boats, undertaking painstaking restoration efforts to bring these vital pieces of history back to life. These restored vessels, now proudly displayed in museums and at commemorative events worldwide, serve as powerful, tangible links to the past. They are not just exhibits, they are living testaments to the ingenuity that defined a critical moment in human history. To stand before a restored LCVP, to touch its wooden hull, is to connect directly with the millions of soldiers it carried, and with the visionary who conceived it. Each boat, once a ubiquitous workhorse, now stands as a monument to its own profound impact and to the man who dared to build it. Furthermore, the digital age has provided an unprecedented platform for sharing and amplifying Higgins's story. Online communities dedicated to military history, forums where veterans and their families share personal accounts, and educational platforms have all contributed to a collective effort to ensure his contributions are not forgotten. These digital archives and discussions allow for a more democratic process of historical remembrance, where individual stories and overlooked facts can coalesce into a powerful, collective narrative. It's a testament to the enduring power of his invention that even generations removed from the war find themselves captivated by the sheer audacity and effectiveness of the Higgins boat. What makes Higgins' story resonate so profoundly today is its embodiment of a uniquely American spirit, that of the maverick innovator, the self-made man who defies convention to achieve the impossible. He was not a product of elite engineering schools or established military design bureaus. He was a boat builder from Louisiana, whose practical ingenuity, fierce independence, and unyielding commitment to his vision allowed him to outmaneuver bureaucratic inertia and deliver precisely what was needed, when it was needed most. His battles with the Navy, his insistence on quality, and his progressive labor practices, once seen as eccentricities, are now celebrated as hallmarks of a true visionary who prioritized purpose over protocol. His legacy extends beyond the physical boats themselves. Andrew Jackson Higgins pioneered mass production techniques that were revolutionary for the shipbuilding industry, proving that complex, specialized vessels could be built with speed and efficiency on an unprecedented scale. He created a workforce that was a model of diversity and inclusion long before such concepts became widely accepted, recognizing that talent and dedication knew no racial or gender boundaries. This holistic approach to industrial leadership, combining innovation in design with groundbreaking manufacturing and human resources, speaks to a genius far broader than just naval architecture. He didn't just build boats. He built an industrial powerhouse that fueled victory, and he did so with an ethical foresight that was decades ahead of its time. The Higgins boat, then, is more than just a landing craft. It is a symbol. It represents the crucial, often overlooked role of industrial might and individual ingenuity in wartime. It stands for the idea that victory is not solely forged on battlefields by soldiers, but also in factories by workers and in the minds of visionary inventors. It reminds us that history is often shaped by those who toil outside the spotlight, whose contributions, though less glamorous, are no less vital. Andrew Jackson Higgins's journey from the obscurity of a New Orleans boatyard to becoming the man who won the war is a powerful narrative that challenges our conventional understanding of heroism. As we continue to reflect on the monumental events of World War II, the story of Andrew Jackson Higgins serves as a potent reminder of the profound impact one individual can have. His unwavering belief in his designs, his relentless drive to overcome obstacles, and his ultimate success in delivering the tools that enabled the greatest amphibious assault in history underscore a timeless truth. Ingenuity, when coupled with perseverance, can indeed change the world. The humble Higgins boat and the extraordinary man behind it stand as enduring testaments to a legacy that, after decades in the shadows, is finally receiving the recognition it so richly deserves. The full measure of his genius, once a whispered secret among military historians, is now slowly but surely being brought into the light, ensuring that the ship that saved D-Day and the unlikely genius who invented it will never again be forgotten. The slow, painstaking journey of Andrew Jackson Higgins' rediscovery has, in recent years, gained significant momentum, propelled by a deeper understanding of World War II's complexities and a renewed appreciation for its unsung heroes. This resurgence of interest isn't merely academic. It has permeated popular consciousness through modern documentaries, meticulously researched books, and compelling articles. These narratives move beyond traditional battlefield accounts to explore the pivotal role of industrial innovation, bringing Higgins and his boats into sharper focus. They highlight not just the mechanical genius of the LCVP, but the extraordinary, often turbulent personality of its creator, presenting a fuller, more nuanced portrait of the man. Crucially, institutions like the National WWII Museum, alongside historical societies and preservation groups, have championed Higgins's legacy. They actively seek out surviving Higgins boats, undertaking painstaking restoration efforts to bring these vital pieces of history back to life. These restored vessels, proudly displayed in museums and at commemorative events worldwide, serve as powerful, tangible links to the past. To stand before a restored LCVP, to touch its wooden hull, is to connect directly with the millions of soldiers it carried, and with the visionary who conceived it. Each boat, once a ubiquitous workhorse, now stands as a monument to its profound impact and to the man who dared to build it. The digital age further amplifies this, with online communities ensuring his contributions are not forgotten, captivating new generations with the sheer audacity and effectiveness of the Higgins boat. What makes Higgins's story resonate so profoundly today is its embodiment of a uniquely American spirit, that of the maverick innovator, the self-made man who defied convention to achieve the impossible. He was not a product of elite engineering schools or established military design bureaus. He was a boat builder from Louisiana whose practical ingenuity, fierce independence, and unyielding commitment to his vision allowed him to outmaneuver bureaucratic inertia and deliver precisely what was needed when it was needed most. His battles with the Navy, his insistence on quality, and his progressive labor practices, once seen as eccentricities, are now celebrated as hallmarks of a true visionary who prioritized purpose over protocol. His legacy extends beyond the physical boats themselves. Andrew Jackson Higgins pioneered mass production techniques that were revolutionary for the shipbuilding industry, proving that complex, specialized vessels could be built with speed and efficiency on an unprecedented scale. He created a workforce that was a model of diversity and inclusion long before such concepts became widely accepted, recognizing that talent and dedication knew no racial or gender boundaries. This holistic approach to industrial leadership, combining innovation in design with groundbreaking manufacturing and human resources, speaks to a genius far broader than just naval architecture. He didn't just build boats, he built an industrial powerhouse that fueled victory, and he did so with an ethical foresight that was decades ahead of its time. The Higgins boat, then, is more than just a landing craft. It is a symbol. It represents the crucial, often overlooked role of industrial might and individual ingenuity in wartime. It stands for the idea that victory is not solely forged on battlefields by soldiers, but also in factories by workers and in the minds of visionary inventors. It reminds us that history is often shaped by those who toil outside the spotlight, whose contributions, though less glamorous, are no less vital. Andrew Jackson Higgins's journey from the obscurity of a New Orleans boatyard to becoming the man who won the war is a powerful narrative that challenges our conventional understanding of heroism. As we continue to reflect on the monumental events of World War II, the story of Andrew Jackson Higgins serves as a potent reminder of the profound impact one individual can have. His unwavering belief in his designs, his relentless drive to overcome obstacles, and his ultimate success in delivering the tools that enabled the greatest amphibious assault in history underscore a timeless truth. Ingenuity, when coupled with perseverance, can indeed change the world. The humble Higgins boat and the extraordinary man behind it stand as enduring testaments to a legacy that, after decades in the shadows, is finally receiving the recognition it so richly deserves. The full measure of his genius, once a whispered secret among military historians, is now, slowly but surely, being brought into the light, ensuring that the ship that saved D-Day and the unlikely genius who invented it will never again be forgotten. What are your thoughts on Andrew Jackson Higgins's incredible journey from forgotten boat builder to a pivotal figure in the greatest conflict in human history? Share your insights and any untold stories you know in the comments below. And if you're as fascinated by the unsung heroes and hidden truths of warfare as we are, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Legends of War, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the annals of military legend.